Carlos Rodón was a true ace for the San Francisco Giants in 2022, and just like last year when Kevin Gausman was the same and then hit free agency, the Giants have a decision to make whether to bring back Rodón or to replace Rodón with somebody else. So we're going to get into what those options are now that we have some contract predictions from some major publications next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, I want to get into a lot of different things, but starting with the starting pitcher market, because we now have both FanGraphs and ESPN, and we await MLB Trade Rumors releasing their list tomorrow. We have the top 50 free agents lists for both of those publications, and they also give contract predictions. And so, we have our own ideas, but it's nice to see some major publications that generally do a good job with these predictions, putting these out, and so it can give us a good example of what we're looking at with these players. And so for Rodón, it's like a mirror image of last offseason when Kevin Gausman reached free agency after having an ace caliber season with the Giants. And what Gausman went on to do was get a significant contract not from the San Francisco Giants. He got it from the Toronto Blue Jays. It ended up being a 5-year, I think it was $110 million deal. Yes, 5-1-10, which funnily enough came out to $22 million per year. And what the Giants then pivoted to, when they pivoted to Rodón, his contract actually averaged the exact same amount per year, $22 million. So it was a savvy move to get an identical 2022 salary essentially, but it was only a 1 or 2 year commitment versus 5 for Gausman. And the risk with the 5-year deal, it's shocking. If you look back 5 years ago and look at these lists that MLB Trade Rumors and whoever put out about who are the top starting pitchers, it's always shocking to see, wow, I can't believe at one point we considered that guy to be $100 million player. Like, it happens every year. Dallas Keuchel has a $20 million team option for this upcoming season, just by way of example. He's not even maybe worth $1 million, let alone 20. And so that's just kind of what we're saying here. And so for Rodón, are the Giants going to do the same thing? The predicted contracts, according to FanGraphs predicted 5 years, $120 million for Rodón. And ESPN predicted 5 years, $130 million for Rodón. So the same number of years, a difference of just $2 million a year, either 24 or 26. And this aligns with what I'm thinking here, which is that Rodón is probably going to do better than Kevin Gausman by some amount. I don't think he's going to get $10 million more per season, but I could see Rodón getting 26, 27, maybe $28 million a year. I mean, inflation is a real thing, and also I just think that the season Rodón had was that good. And also Rodón did it in 2021. It wasn't like this was totally out of nowhere. He was a potential ace when the Giants signed him. There was just some injury risk. He had the shoulder fatigue down the stretch with the White Sox. And he proved this year that 2021 was no fluke. And so we're looking at 2 seasons of just elite caliber pitching, elite strikeout ability, and just being one of the better starters in the game. And so this is kind of a reasonable price tag for a guy who you would consider a top 5, certainly top 10 starting pitcher in baseball probably. And it's not like Rodón is particularly old either. He's not even 30 years old yet. He turns 30 in December, like a month from tomorrow. And so I don't know, like on the one hand, I felt like this was reasonable for Kevin Gausman. And so I feel the same way when I look at 5-120, 5-130. I think those were the two. Yeah, those were the two guesses here by the two sources we're talking about, I think that's pretty reasonable. But I do, 5 years is a long time. It doesn't like sound that way, especially when we're looking at Aaron Judge and Trey Turner and Carlos Correa and talking 8, 9, 10 years even for some guys. When you talk about 5, it's like, okay, well, that's more reasonable. But at the same time, starting pitchers, and it just really, like Madison Bumgarner got a 5-year deal from the Arizona Diamondbacks, and how has that gone? And it feels like he's been there a while, right? Well, he's got 2 years left on that deal. It's been bad right away. He's not the same type of pitcher. Bumgarner was never this guy who was just absolutely blowing hitters away with strikeouts, especially that he was starting to show some signs of decline when he hit the open market and ultimately ended up with the D-backs. But what's crazy is that the contract that Madison Bumgarner got from Arizona wasn't too far off than what we're talking about here with Gausman and Rodón. Bumgarner got 5 years, $85 million, and we're talking 5 years, $120 million maybe for Rodón. To me, there's like a market inefficiency here. I don't know why. It's just because I think that the trend with a lot of pitchers, including now Bumgarner, is that these deals go south. That the risk is kind of being priced into these estimated and ultimately real contracts for starting pitchers. And so, I don't know. I like Rodón at that price. And what particularly strikes me is the contrast between Rodón and then the other options if they elected to go another direction. Like if Rodón, just like Kevin Gausman, were to sign elsewhere because the Giants weren't comfortable with 5 years, what do? Because last year they had a good fallback option in Rodón and ended up working out great. But are those options out there this year? I would argue that they are, but it's not going to come in the form of like Rodón got $22 million a year. We're talking maybe close to double the average annual value that Rodón is going to get. Rodón's going to get 20, maybe not double, but double the value of Kevin Gausman. Like we are talking with Jacob deGrom, Justin Verlander, we're talking closer to $40 million a year. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to look at the predicted contracts for who would be the fallback option for Carlos Rodón and ultimately kind of try to make a decision about which player, whether it's Rodón, deGrom, Verlander, or someone else, makes the most sense for the San Francisco Giants this offseason. So we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, if you've ever thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you're going to want to listen up. And especially as the holidays come up, property crimes like burglaries and particularly package thefts as well spike nationally. And right now, Locked On Giants listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. And I personally endorse this highly. I love being able to just open up the app, check in on all those crystal clear HD cameras, control everything from the app. And it's a very secure feeling being able to do that. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that I recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, as promised, continuing the question about what do the Giants do at starting pitcher? Is it going to be a, replay of last offseason, letting their, not homegrown, but letting their player walk and signing somebody else? It's going to be different because I don't necessarily see like a replica of the Carlos Rodón situation where you're getting ace innings, but there's some risk. And so the price is discounted like there was with Rodón. We're going to see that these predictions for those types of guys are much higher than what Rodón got last year. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. So yes, like when we're examining the starting pitcher market, it is interesting to see who the alternatives are. Like, for example, Jacob deGrom. We've long talked about him as a possible alternative. He officially, I think, opted out. If it wasn't official, which I think it was, then it will be soon, by tomorrow. He's opting out, and he's a true free agent here. And the prediction by FanGraphs, we discussed it yesterday, 3 years, $141 million, $47 million per year. This would just shatter the record for average annual value. I think Scherzer set it last year at 43.3, and now we're talking, the prediction is not just he'll beat it by a little bit, he's going to beat it by over $3 million, $3.67 million he would beat it. And we said that yesterday. I thought that was a little bit outrageous. And then ESPN comes out today. And by the way, these aren't just like generic people at ESPN doing these. This is Kylie McDaniel, who I think is a really good reporter. Now, he used to work at FanGraphs as a prospect analyst. He worked for the Atlanta Braves, and now he's at ESPN, and he does a good job. And so he's kind of got inside information, got connections in the game. It's not some of these lists you're going to see out there. I often won't pay any attention to them because I don't trust the author. But for FanGraphs and ESPN here, and for MLB Trade Rumors tomorrow, I do. And so the prediction from Kylie McDaniel of ESPN for deGrom is 3 years, $132 million, $44 million per year. And his logic is that you're beating the Scherzer $43.3 million per year and just making it, did I say 33? $43.3 million per year and just making it 44. So you're beating it, but you're not beating it by many millions of dollars. And so I think that's more realistic as kind of the high end. I somewhat have some doubts that he gets a third guaranteed year, just given the injury risk with Jacob deGrom. And so when we're talking about both of these contracts predictions for deGrom come in higher in terms of total money over 3 years than they're talking about for Rodón over 5 years. And so that, I don't know that makes sense for like a team like the Giants, because I mean, it matters when you spread it out over 5 years, because if you have like an annual budget, having the lower average annual value for Rodón, we're talking roughly $25 million per year, versus these guys, we're talking $45 million per year, $20 million more per year. The upside is that years 4 and 5, you're not committing anything. So it's in the short term more per year, but in the long term, I mean, overall, if we had 0-0, I don't know what that would come out to, but you get what I'm saying. It's just, is deGrom worth that much more per year? I don't know that he is. And so that, while I would love to have Jacob deGrom, that kind of contract, I'm not sure that I see the Giants going $45 million a year over 3 years for a starting pitcher who's injury prone, as good as he is. So the next option, and the one that maybe represents more of a middle ground to an extent, is Justin Verlander. The downside for Verlander is that he's 40 years old. He's going to be 40 years old before opening day 2023. And FanGraphs predicts 2 years, $80 million, $40 million per year. ESPN predicts 2 years, $72 million, $36 million per year. And if that's what it costs, 2 years, 72 million, and you're getting Justin Verlander, who, yes, he is, old for a baseball player, but at the same time, what did he just do? He had a 1.75 ERA in 175 innings for the Houston Astros, 6.1 FanGraphs wins above replacement. And FanGraphs wins above replacement is using fielding independent pitching, not ERA. So the FIP was like a run higher. But if we go by runs allowed per 9 WAR, which is also available on FanGraphs, it's at 7. So I would prefer this player over what they're predicting for Jacob deGrom. And let's see, what did Justin Verlander do in the postseason? He had a 5.85 ERA, and so 4 starts, 20 innings. We factor that in a little bit, but at the same time, I think it's a risk worth taking if he would want to come to the Giants. And so this is one of those cases where I'm not sure that the Giants would be his top pick because I believe he's kind of chasing wins at this point. He wants to get to 300 wins and he has 244. And so it would kind of make sense to go to a team that didn't just finish 81 and 81. Maybe you go out and make a couple of major additions and then try to use that to lure him here. But I think they would strongly prefer like a 2-year deal at $35 million a year versus a 5-year deal at $25 million per year. It comes out to about roughly half, a little more than half of the total guaranteed money. The deGrom situation is just a little bit bonkers to me, but I think Verlander represents a nice middle ground. So beyond that, the starting pitcher market thins out quite a bit, and there aren't necessarily obviously like extremely good pitchers. You've got guys who provide some intrigue. There's Taijuan Walker, Chris Bassett, Zach Eflin, Ross Stripling, Tyler Anderson, who was with the Giants in 2020 and had a nice year with the Dodgers. There's Nathan Eovaldi, Jamison Tyone, Clayton Kershaw appears on these lists, and to me, he might be the best fit of all, just because you're gonna potentially get really good ace-like production, and for whatever reason, the contract is not going to look similar to deGrom or to Verlander probably, but I just have no reason to believe he would ever taint his legacy by leaving the Dodgers and coming to the Giants. Like he can do whatever he wants in life, and why kind of add that confusing part of the end of your career by joining the rival of the team you're going to go into the Hall of Fame with? I just don't see that as a possibility. I also like Andrew Heaney. So these are some options. There's also a player, I think he's out of Japan. I don't know how to pronounce this, Kodai Senga, who is predicted to be the next best starter after the guys I named, according to some of these sources. ESPN has him getting $72 million, and FanGraphs has him getting $56 million. So those are the starting pitcher options. And in terms of who I would prefer, I think that Verlander makes a lot of sense. Kershaw, if somehow that was a possibility. And then I'm kind of tossing up. It's kind of a toss-up for me between deGrom and Rodón at those predicted prices. There's also the trade market. There's no rule saying they have to do this through free agency, but it's pretty clear they have said it and they've done it in recent years. They've done a very good job, like at bringing in starting pitchers to, like, including on not expensive deals, and they end up performing really well. Like Kevin Gausman was initially brought in on a 1-year, $9 million deal, and then he was brought back on a 1-year, like roughly $20 million deal after that. And so they got ace level production on these 1-year deals. And so there's multiple routes they could go to do this, but they've made it clear that they're not just going to sign some middling starter. I think they want frontline production. So it's just going to be a matter of how do they do that. And I think the main guys I talked about today are the most likely route to get there, but there's always other routes that are possible. So coming up in just a minute, tomorrow is the first kind of major key deadline day in this offseason, and things are going to change rather dramatically, and the Giants have some decisions to make by tomorrow. We'll discuss what those are in just a minute, but first. All right, as promised, I just want to preview what is to come tomorrow for the San Francisco Giants and really for all of baseball. Tomorrow finally is the official start of free agency, in that other teams can sign any free agent. So like Aaron Judge, in theory, Giants could sign him tomorrow. They couldn't sign him today on Wednesday, but they could on Thursday. They won't, and the way that the MLB offseason works is that a lot of times the best players end up signing late, and a lot of the activity doesn't happen even until the winter meetings. There's always a smattering of signings between when free agency opens and the winter meetings, which are in early December. But, in many years, in the last 5+ years, a lot of the best players haven't signed until January, February, even March in some cases. And so I think the Giants, given that they need more than just one player, probably will be pretty active. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're involved in something between the true start of free agency tomorrow and the winter meetings. And then at the winter meetings, certainly they've been active in the past, and I would expect that to probably continue. They have a lot of work to do. It's not just like bring back a starting pitcher, whether it's Rodón or somebody else, and maybe sign an outfielder and call it a day. No, I think they ultimately are going to be among the busiest teams. Jeff Passan of ESPN recently said he would be very surprised if the Giants aren't a top 3 spending team this offseason. And so I look forward to the activity. But also, there's more than just the start of free agency tomorrow. It's also the day that option decisions are due. And what I mean by options is like team options or player options. And for the Giants, they have one remaining, and that's Evan Longoria. They have not made an official call on Evan Longoria's option. It's a $13 million team option with a $5 million buyout. So even if they didn't choose to bring him back, they still would owe him $5 million. And so I really doubt that they just pick up the $13 million option, which they could if they wanted to. But instead, I could see them declining the option and then bringing him back for like an additional $2 or $3 million. Or simply just declining the option and keeping their kind of options open, so to speak, in that they're not necessarily committing to Longoria, because it's a pretty saturated market. There's a lot of players out there. And do you really want to make that commitment to Longoria at this stage of the offseason? That remains to be seen. Tomorrow is also the deadline for extending qualifying offers to qualified free agents. And the Giants have not many, but a few qualified free agents, and only one of them is a slam dunk to receive the qualifying offer, and that's Carlos Rodón. So coming up tomorrow, you're going to hear about Evan Longoria's option, what the Giants do there, and you're going to hear that the Giants gave Rodón a qualifying offer. Now, the only way that they wouldn't give him the qualifying offer is if they somehow reach an extension before tomorrow's deadline to extend the qualifying offer. And so I don't think that's likely, but it is a possibility. So one way or another, there's going to be news about Rodón tomorrow and Evan Longoria. And then in theory, like Jock Peterson is also eligible to receive the qualifying offer. I don't think they'll give it to him, but they could. It's a possibility. I just think it's not likely at all, but it is a possibility. So anyway, I look forward to coming back tomorrow, and we'll have that news. We'll also have Pete Patella and Farhan Zaidi media availability today from the GM meetings. And so we're going to discuss whatever it is that they have to say. And then coming up later in the week, a mailbag as well. So a lot more to get to this week. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.